Okay, so now that we know how to factor ax squared plus bx plus c, now we're going to learn how to solve ax squared plus bx plus c. So this is going to be a little bit of a shorter lesson here because we've already solved before. We solved when it was x squared plus bx plus c. So now we're just adding that a in front, but the method of solving is still the same. We're going to want to get one side to equal 0 first, then we're going to want to factor the trinomial, and then we're going to want to set each factor equal to 0. So if you remember, when we did a problem like x squared plus 2x plus 1, and we wanted it set equal to 0, and we wanted to solve this. First, we set it equal to 0. We made sure that it equaled 0. Then we factored our trinomial. Because this had a coefficient of 1, we did it the regular way, meaning two numbers that multiply to get 1. So that's just going to be 1 and 1. And then they add up to be 2. So this would factor to be x plus 1 equals 0. And then we would set each of our factors, the x plus 1 equal to 0, and then the x plus 1 equal to 0, and then we would solve both of these equations. So we would get -1 and -1. So this is what we did back in our previous lesson. But like I said, now we're going to be working when we have a coefficient there. So let's just say I wanted to solve the equation, let's say we had 2x squared plus 9x minus 18 equals 0. So here, what I would do is step 1 is to make sure it's set equal to 0. So I'm going to write the steps over here. So step 1, set the equation equal to 0. In this case, it already is, so step 1 is done. Step 2 is then to factor. So I'm going to take this side and I'm going to factor it. So the first thing I should notice here is 2, 9, and 18 don't have a GCF. They have a coefficient here in front of the x squared. So this has to be factored in our new way that we were talking about yesterday. Meaning, I look at AC, and AC is 2 times 18, which is 36. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to get 36 that will add to get positive 9. And actually, sorry, this should be negative 36 because it's a negative 18. So two numbers that multiply to get negative 36 and add to get positive 9. So I write out my factors of negative 36. So I have 1 and negative 36. I have 2 and negative 18. I have 3 and negative 12. I have 6 and 6. I have 4 and 8. Oh, sorry, these should be negative. And then I can switch them around. I could say negative 1 and 36, negative 2 and 18, negative 3 and 12, negative 6 and 6. That's going to be the same either way, so I don't have to worry about it. But negative 4 and 8. So again, I'm looking for which pair is going to add to be 9. This is going to be negative 35. This is going to be 35. This is going to be negative 16, and this is 16. This is negative 9. This one's positive 9. So I found the pair that I need. So this will break up. The positive 9x is going to break up into a negative 3x plus a 12x. I'm going to bring the minus 18 down, bring the 2x squared down. Don't forget it's equal to 0. And now I'm going to factor my 4-termed polynomial by grouping. The GCF of the 2x squared minus 3x, that's going to be an x. So I take out an x, I'm left with 2x minus 3. The GCF of 12x and 18 is going to be 6. So that's going to give me a 2x minus 3. Again, I see a twin, so I'm going to rewrite it as, sorry about that, the GCFs, x plus 6, and the twins, 2x minus 3, don't forget the equal 0. So now I have factored this out. Step 3 is to then solve. Set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So that means I'm going to take my first factor of x plus 6, set it equal to 0, and solve. So subtract 6 from both sides, and I get x equals negative 6. I'm going to do the same thing for the second factor. 2x minus 3. Set that equal to 0, and solve. So I'm going to get 2x equals 3, divide by 2, and I should get x equals 3 halves. And again, I get two answers here. Remember, when we're solving our factoring equations, we should get two answers. Our answers should be the same as our degree. If we have a second degree function, we should get two answers. So my answers here, again, I want to put them in our set. So it would be the set of numbers, 3 halves, and negative 6. That would be my final answer. Okay, so let's try one more together. Let's do something like if I had negative 4x squared plus 19x equals negative 30. So in this case, if we follow along with our 3-step process that we were just talking about, step 1 is to set the equation equal to 0. Meaning I need one of my sides, either this side or this side, to equal 0. So in this case, a lot of you would probably say, well, let's just take the negative 30 and add 30 to both sides. And I would agree with you. But the reason I'm not going to do that is if I look here, see how the coefficient of x squared is negative? I don't like having negative coefficients on my x squared. If I ever see that, I want to move that to the other side. Meaning, I'm going to make this side here equal to 0. So I'm going to move both of these to the other side. I'm going to add a 4x squared to both sides, and I'm going to subtract a 19x from both sides. So what I'm actually going to get here is this side is going to end up being 0, and over here I'm going to have a positive 4x squared minus 19x minus 30. Now I have a positive coefficient here. It's equal to 0. Step 1 is done. So now I'm going to do step 2, which is factor. So I'm going to take this side and I'm going to factor it. 4, 19, and 30 don't have anything in common, so I'm going to work with my AC. So AC in this case is going to be negative 120. So I want to look for my factor pairs of negative 120. Now, obviously, in lieu of time, I will give you what the two factors are, but you'd probably have to list them all out here. So we're going to say that the factor pairs of negative 120, we're going to work with 24 and 5, or in this case, negative 24 and positive 5. Okay, again, there are a lot of factor pairs of negative 120, so you're going to have to kind of write them all out. But once you get to negative 24 and 5, you realize that when you add those together, you want it to equal negative 19, and this one does equal negative 19. So I'm going to take negative 19 and I'm going to split it up to be negative 24x plus 5x. Bring down the 30, bring down the 4x squared. Don't forget the equal 0. And now I can factor this by grouping. In the first set of parentheses, the GCF here is going to be a 4x. When I factor out a 4x, I'm going to be left with x minus 6. In the second set of parentheses, the GCF here is going to be 5. When I factor out a 5, I'm left with x minus 6. I see a twin, so I take my two GCFs, put them in one parenthesis, 4x plus 5, put the twins in the other one, and I have done step 2 of factoring. Now step 3, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. Take each one of my 2, 4x plus 5, set it equal to 0. So we're going to subtract 5. We're going to get 4x equals negative 5. We're going to divide by 4 and get x equals negative 5/4. Same thing over here. I'm going to do x minus 6 equals 0. And I'm going to solve for x. In this case, I get x equals 6. So my two answers will be 6 and negative 5/4.